Okay, taking some time today, going to lift up Recon 1, get the axle up on jack stands, and remove those front tires. Then I'm going to disconnect the steering stabilizer, which quite frankly I've had some problems with it rubbing on the tie rod. I've had problems with this Steer Smarts tie rod. I think we'll do some analysis on it, but at the end of the day, I'm not impressed with the Steer Smart steel tie rod. I think these things bend too easy. They're almost impossible to bend back. So we've got a replacement for it today. So we'll get this thing on jack stands and get this tie rod removed. Okay, you can see I got the toe plates on. Gonna start with a measurement to see where I'm at. I know it's off. I'm also gonna disconnect that steering stabilizer. Then I'll be undoing these nuts right here and dropping this Steer Smarts tie rod out. 21 mil, use the impact gun. I'll tap this knuckle lightly, and this tie rod's been in and out many times, should drop right out. We'll get that thing out. I measured what I had, and as I suspected, I was 1/8 of an inch outboard rather than toe in. So not really happy about that, but we'll look at these tie rod ends in more detail. But I suspect this whole damn thing is bent enough where no matter how I set it up, this thing takes a shot, and it just seems to affect my steering. I'm done messing around with it, switching over to 70-75 aluminum. That's the whole purpose of this job. I want to have some flexibility to hit a rock and then have it go back into its original position. So that's where I'm at. I'm going to measure center to center on the joints, on the tie rod ends. Give me a ballpark as to how long the new tie rod needs to be. So we're just going to get this as a reference. It'll put us in the ballpark. Okay, you're looking at RPM's 2.5 ton 70-75 aluminum tie rod. You'll notice these huge jam nuts. There's Bellevue washers in there. We're going to take it all apart. Got to anti-seize these threads. Back the jam nut off. You can see they use Castle nuts here on the ends. This is a plastic cover that comes off. You'll notice also that there's a hole drilled through it. It uses Castle nuts like a ball joint. So there's a cotter pin that goes through there. My original measurement center to center approximately was 58.5. So after I anti-seize these ends up and reinstall them, then we'll look for 58.5 as a reference point to get us started. You can see I had to buy a new standard mount steering stabilizer clamp, 2-inch ID on that. So pretty excited about it. Maybe I'll put the two tie rods up against each other so you can get an idea of the comparison. And once again, Steer Smarts heavy duty steel Yeti XD they call it. Had it on the Jeep a few years. Quite honestly, it bent almost instantly, and I even brought it into work and put it on a press. One of the things I never cared for was you just had one little clamp on the end. And actually, you can even see it in the video. I mean, obviously, some would say, well, why didn't you just replace the center section? RPM actually sells the center section alone to reuse the Yeti tie rod ends. But you can see even these ends are bent. So the one clamp, the one collar on the adjustment sleeve, I think that's kind of a weak link. But we'll put the two up against each other and we'll make some comparisons. The ends themselves look quite similar as far as the size. The real magic is the center section, the 70-75 aluminum. That's a 2-inch tie rod right there. Wow, that thing is pure beef, but the whole idea is it should be able to take a hit, bounce back into original position. So that's why I made this purchase. And quite honestly, I'm sick of dealing with tow issues on my Jeep from this damn tie rod. Okay, an interesting little update here. So, you measure this nut, you think it's 1 3/4 inches. It's not. It's metric. So if you were to use a crow's foot, you'd need 46 millimeter on that. And then what they recommended, I called RPM, and they says, look it. He says, in all honesty, they use a 15-inch crescent wrench and an 18-inch crescent wrench with 2 men, and they crank on this thing for all they're worth. But what was really interesting is even though the directions say to anti-seize all of this, he says the biggest trick is once you get it close is to use WD-40 and rotate this nut back and forth and get all the anti-seize off of the threads that are underneath the nut. You can use WD-40. They found that works great. Then even brake cleaner. He says you don't need to use blue Loctite. You can if you want, but don't forget you do have a serrated Bellevue washer right there. But the trick is to not have anti-seize under the thread. So what I'll do is everything's scooped up right now. This one I did a little differently. You can see less anti-seize there, but he said they found WD-40 takes it right off really nice. Then you can clean it. You can use a steel brush or whatever, get it nice and clean and dry. Then use 2 crescent wrenches. And when you get your toe set to a 1/16 to 1/8 of an inch toe in, then you can crank down on that jam nut on both sides. The Castle nuts on the rod ends, these get torqued to 75 foot-pounds. So I'll get it in place, and then we'll deal with torquing those up with another guy another day. So no problem. Good start, though, today, getting it into place. Okay, I just placed the tie rod in. Nothing's tight. I didn't even tighten up the Castle nuts yet. Just got the general dimension, which was 58.5, gets me in the ballpark. You can see I added the 2 Zerk fittings down at the bottom. Steering stabilizer is just hanging there. This obviously, if it works, will end up on the new clamp like this. Hopefully it does. Just gonna leave that for now. And the most interesting thing, and you can see, if I get out of the, let's see, hopefully you can see all that anti-seize. So I gotta remove, once I get this close, all this mating surface right here, when I actually tighten this up with 2 crescent wrenches, I got to get all that anti-seize off of there now. They highly recommended that. They really want all the anti-seize in the aluminum portion, which makes sense. So even though they give you like a 200 foot-pound on this nut, you know, it's really not supposed to be wet. So we got to get that anti-seize out. Once again, Junior at RPM said, hey, look, we found WD-40 takes it off real good. So I can back this off and go back and forth and spray it and get that all out. Maybe some brake cleaner, dry it. Then I'll get another guy over here and we'll torque this up once I got it dialed into the 1/16 to 1/8 of an inch toe in. All right, I just gunned it down. You can see that the tie rod end is nice and level. Now I'm going to put the 19 millimeter socket on this, torque it to 75 foot-pounds. And then, as you know, if the hole doesn't line up for the Castle nut, you just tighten it a little more till it lines up to put the cotter pin through. That actually looks pretty good for the cotter pin. $75 foot-pounds. Okay, this nut torqued to 75 foot-pounds, cotter pin through it, folded back. That's a wrap. You look at the tie rod end, she's sitting nice and level. I'm not used to seeing that. Boy, that's beautiful. Wow. All right, so now the trick would be to get my measurement for my toe in and then use the adjuster sleeve, rotate it until I get my 1/16 to 1/8 of an inch toe in. You can see I got to remove some anti-seize here, so I'm going to try to get rid of all that anti-seize and get it nice and clean. All right, so what I ended up using is I got nylon brushes, I got metal brushes, I used alcohol, and you can see that where this jam nut is going to crank in against the Bellevue washer and the adjuster sleeve, I'm basically removing all anti-seize. So I'm just going back and forth with this nut and getting this all nice and clean. The anti-seize is from here all in. That way, when I go to tighten up this jam nut, I'm going to have a good, dry, clean surface with no anti-seize. All right, so this is the front side with the toe plates. To the outside of the toe plate, 66 3/4. Going to look behind the front wheel now. Once again, 66 3/4. Okay, this is behind the front tires, and you can see I have 66 13/16, which means my toe in is 1/16 of an inch toe in right now. All right, just to look at the RPM tie rod. It's in location. I ended up cleaning the threads, as you know. Then I really want to get a second guy over here to work on this a little more, to really torque these good. I got them hand tight as much as I could do with a couple large wrenches, but I want to get a second guy over here and really crank on them. Put the steering stabilizer bracket on there, pick the middle, halfway from full compression, halfway from full extension, so that you can turn the wheel far passenger and far driver without destroying the stabilizer. I kind of rotated it back a little bit. I'm hoping that works okay. Don't know for sure. Sometimes you got to have some trial and error and disconnect the sway bar disconnect and get out on the trail to really see how it is. But hopefully we're okay here. So not bad. Pretty easy install. We'll get this thing torqued, get the tires on, and test it out another day though. That's it for tonight. Hey, just a reminder for you guys with bead locks. The changing of the season, the temperatures. I'm just going around and torquing all the rock ring bolts. There's 24 of them. And the ATX slabs get torqued to 24 foot-pounds. And I'm getting about 1/4 of a turn out of each one of them on the first round. And then, of course, I'm dead nuts going around the second time. So take care of your bead locks.